So today I'm going to talk about pen caps and why you should care about their mechanical design properties because it relates to your health and anatomy and all of these things, right? So was randomly fascinated today just like fidgeting with this pen cap because I've always had this question because I'm always fidgeting like this, but part of me is like a bit worried that I'm putting wear and tear on the pen and the pen cap, right? By just doing this over and over again. So today I just did a deep dive to solve this problem once and for all. And what I found was really interesting, right? So mechanical design engineers actually put a lot of thought into this motion to make sure that they call it a snap fit joint. When you push something, it snaps and then it fits together with something else. It's called a snap fit joint. And they put a lot of thought into the properties of the snap fit joint. And they have different ways of measuring the stress that is put on the material when you're doing this over and over again. And the idea that's most relevant to my question that I originally had is the idea of fatigue. And fatigue is how many stress cycles or how many times can I do this before the material cracks, right? And so mechanical engineers will try to choose certain materials that are very resistant to stress, that are able to like bend and come back into shape without creating these cracks that cause problems later. But as I was researching fatigue, and by the way, plastic, the good news is that plastic is very resistant to fatigue, especially in this kind of way. It's hard to find a precise number because every design is different, but I'm pretty sure I can do this millions of times before anything bad happening. Probably something to be more concerned about is like abrasion of the friction of this, like the indented part of the pen cap. Like if you see here, this the edge of this rim is lipped, like it's slightly protruding, and there's like a little thing here. And so if I just drop it and it goes 99% of the way down, and I just have to push it the last way so the lip goes over this protrusion thing here. And so probably the thing to be worried about is like, all right, the plastic of this lip getting scraped off and then the cap becoming loose. But at this point, I didn't care about pens anymore, right? I'm interested in mechanical design world. So I'm reading about other ways materials can get stressed, and another way they can get stressed is creep, right? So creep is a technical term that means, basically the idea is, some people read books, these barbarians read books, and when they're reading the book, they're just like bending the book like this and like holding it up to their head and just reading it and like in this in this way, and you just feel like, oh, that's not good for the book. It's actually not good for the book because it's putting this constant stress in the book so that it will permanently deform, right? And this permanent deformation that arises from constant stress is called creep. And so you can imagine that, if you're holding a book like this for a long period of time, it'll deform, and then you have to actually like deform it the other way, maybe by putting it under a heavy flat object. Some people this happens with posters too, right? Like if you roll up a poster for a long time, it'll permanently be like rolled up. And so you have to unroll it and put it under a mattress to flatten it out again. And you're putting a constant stress in that direction such that the creep makes it flat again. You know what I mean? But that also doesn't matter to me, right? It doesn't really matter to me. But what does matter to me is that these ideas like creep and fatigue are very relevant to human anatomy, right? Especially posture. So it's kind of accepted now that the primary elastic material in the body is fascia. And so if we're thinking about the body in terms of material science, it's very fun. The fascia is a big component. It's very fun to think about what's happening to the fascia. So the fascia is elastic. So, if you just hit yourself like this, or if you're moving around, or something jiggles you kind of jiggle back into place or something. And I'm pretty sure this is what the fascia is responsible for. It's this tensile elastic material that runs through your entire body. And so fascia, because it's a material like this, I learned that it's actually susceptible to these same kinds of creep and fatigue and elastic stress, and elastic limits. These same concepts that you see in mechanical engineering are actually also very relevant to the body. A very pertinent example is posture, right? So our whole body is made of this elastic material called fascia. And so if we're like wearing a heavy backpack and we're like at our laptop and we're constantly hunched over like this, you know, we're putting constant stress and deforming our fascia such that when we stop the activity, our fascia is going to be permanently deformed. It's like rolling up the poster for a long time and just leaving it like that. Even if you stop the activity, even if you relax, your fascia is like still contorted, right? That's like a permanent contortion. And you actually need to like exert a counteractive force to like, you know, unroll the poster and put it on the mattress. You have to do the equivalent of that for yourself to actually reshape yourself back into a healthy posture. And this is actually why when you go to some yoga classes, they either ask you to lie in Shavasana or they ask you to do a counterpose. Now, the counterpose doesn't make any sense to me, right? The counterpose, basically the purpose of both of these things would be to counteract the force of creep from holding one position. You hold one position for a really long time. You don't want your fascia to be permanently deformed. So you want to like bring things back into balance. And so people are like, oh, if you do a back bend for a long time, you should do a forward bend. But that doesn't make any sense to me because when you bend a book backwards for a long time, the way to fix it is not bending the book the other way for a long time, right? So what one yoga teacher told me is counter poses are stupid. What you actually want to do is just lie in Shavasana after you do a pose like a back bend, because that's the equivalent of, you know, compressing a poster under a mattress or something like that. You're just returning it to a neutral position. And the amount of time it takes for fascia to form and reform is not super studied, I don't think, but people say it's like 1 to 4 minutes, right? So if you're laying in Shavasana for 1 to 4 minutes, you can undo all of like the weird deformations that you did to yourself through the process of doing these yoga asanas. And it's also very liberating, right? Because, you know, sometimes I look at myself in the mirror and be like, damn, like I look really fucked up. This is gonna take years to fix and like get back to normal, right? But actually, you know, if fascia is forming and reforming, it's like very easy to deform. So if it's gonna reform in like 4 minutes, then it's not such a big struggle, right? Because people are like, oh, you have to do this exercise every day for 30 days, like do this over and over again. And, you know, I've like been to physical therapy and they like make you do these exercises. I don't have the discipline for that, but I've been experimenting recently with just holding a plank position, because that's like when your back is straight and you're exerting a lot of force to kind of keep your back straight. I've just been planking for as long as I can, and I definitely feel that is helping my posture. I'm not an expert. You shouldn't believe what I'm saying or take it too seriously, but it just really makes sense to my mind that these concepts would connect, and the same patterns that are affecting our pens and our plastics are also affecting the materials that the body is made of. Of course, there's many dimensions to the body that go beyond just the mechanical force. There's like neurobiology and you know, all of these things that make it a much more complex system. But I really feel like the basics probably apply. And so I hope you learned something watching this video. I know it might have been scattered or something like this, but my main purpose is just to connect a lot of dots, to kind of inspire you to think about how the things we might learn in school connect to everything else. Like, if I learned about this in school, like fatigue or creep or whatever, I would not give a fuck, right? Like, this stuff is just, it was never interesting to me in life. But it becomes really enriching when I see that it's actually a pattern that, or a metaphor even, that plays out in many different areas of life. And for some reason, that really turns my brain on and gets me like very inquisitive. That's kind of my main purpose with these videos. Maybe some physical therapy takeaways, like try planking, don't do counter poses, return to Shavasana. Maybe some threads for further investigation if you're interested. But yeah, I hope you got something out of this.